Welcome to The Human Condition, a channel where I explore and define the pattern that shapes human existence. Throughout this series, I will synthesize the insights of great thinkers, writers, philosophers, and psychologists to show what this pattern is, a pattern I call the human condition. In this video, we will approach this pattern through the lens of psychology. We will explore the findings of several psychologists and then relate them back to the pattern of the human condition. In this video in particular, we will mostly be examining the ideas of Dr. Shelley Taylor. She serves as a distinguished professor of psychology at the University of California. She received her PhD from Yale University and was formerly on the faculty at Harvard. Her book, Positive Illusions, Creative Self-Deception in the Healthy Mind, will be relevant to our discussion today. The central idea of her book is this: that we as humans see through rose-colored glasses. The normal human mind distorts incoming information in a positive direction. We construct positive illusions to manage and mask the harshness of reality. She breaks these down into three types. The first, illusions about our own positive attributes and self-worth. Second, illusions about our ability to control our environment. And third, illusions about optimistic future events. We will begin our discussion with her first category of illusions regarding the self. Citing research from other psychologists, Taylor states that in the early years of childhood, a child is his or her own hero. With few exceptions, most children think very well of themselves. Most kindergartners or first graders say that they are at or near the top of the class. They see themselves as popular. Taylor states that children actually see themselves as successful at almost all tasks and possess grandiose expectations for the future. In Jean Piaget's theory of cognitive development, the ages around 2 to 7 are what he calls the pre-operational stage. Children in this stage are highly egocentric, meaning they only see the world through their own perspective and have difficulty understanding other people's emotions, thoughts, and feelings. This egocentrism extends to their self-perception, leading them to believe they are more capable, knowledgeable, and important than they actually are. As we age, these illusions are tempered by our cognitive development and growing experiences. However, Taylor argues that we actually hang on to most of them. They may shrink to some degree, but we keep the illusions because they provide a sense of self-worth, even if it is rather inflated. For example, when asked to describe themselves, most people mention positive qualities, and few, if any, negative ones. Even when people acknowledge they have faults, they downplay and dismiss them as unimportant. In another example, in a large survey, 90% of automobile drivers considered themselves to be better than average drivers. When we succeed, we often take credit. When we fail, we are usually unwilling to accept responsibility for failure, and we find ways to explain poor outcomes as a result of external factors. The man who backs out of his driveway and runs over a bike left there is likely to blame automobile manufacturers for poor visibility, or blame the child who left it there. In 2000, Epley and Dunning ran a study on self-enhancement and overestimation of one's own moral behavior. After a series of 4 small experiments, what they found is that people believe they are more likely to engage in charitable, selfless, and kind acts rather than their peers. People hold overly virtuous views of themselves. Anthony Greenwald's well-known 1980 article, The Totalitarian Ego, Fabrication and Revision of Personal History, makes this point even stronger. He compares the ego, or our sense of self, to a totalitarian regime characterized by extreme censorship and informational clampdowns. The mental regime has one goal: to maintain a positive self-image. Just as a dictator controls the flow of information and rewrites history, the self actively represses or alters our personal history to favor a consistently positive self-image. Those who are married may readily recognize this phenomenon firsthand. In 1979, Ross and Sicoli published a study showing that individuals consistently overestimate their own workload while underestimating others. When husbands and wives were asked to each estimate their household contributions, their combined estimates exceeded 120%. The French writer André Gide said it this way: "Each one of us has his own way of deceiving himself. The important thing is to believe in one's own importance." The second category of illusions in Taylor's work are those illusions about our ability to control our environment. These illusions are easily identifiable in children. When asked to guess how well they do on tasks, children substantially overestimate their own performance. Piaget discovered that little children not only believe they can master their immediate environment, but some take it even further, believing that they can control the movements of the sun, moon, and stars. Over time, a child's sense of control shrinks, but despite the movement towards realism, adults continue to need and desire the illusions that they can master and control the environment. This is also known as the overestimation bias, which states that people overrate their own abilities, performance, and level of control, especially in difficult tasks or situations where failure is likely. We might see an example of this in Shakespeare's The Tempest, with the character of Prospero, the magic-making Duke of Milan, who eventually wakes up from the illusion of control, renounces his attempt to command all the world around him, and accepts human limitation, declaring that "every third thought shall be my grave." Ernest Becker, in his Pulitzer Prize-winning book The Denial of Death, made the point that through our exaggerated impositions of order on the world, we spare ourselves the constant realization of the random terror of death. The third and final set of illusions in Taylor's book are the illusions about optimistic future events. She observes that an unrealistic optimism pervades most of our thinking about the future, more optimistic than reality can support. For example, surveyors each year query the American public about their current lives and what they think it will be like in 5 years. Most surveys report that the present is better than the past, and that the future will be even better. In 2 studies done by Neil Weinstein, it was shown that people consider themselves far less likely than their classmates to have a drinking problem, or to be fired from a job, to get divorced, to become depressed, or to have a heart attack or get cancer. The French Enlightenment thinker known as Voltaire recognized this illusion. In his book Candide, he wrote, "Optimism is the madness of insisting that all is well when we are miserable." Voltaire thought that blind optimism stagnates our growth and can prevent us from taking a course to change the way things currently are. We may settle comfortably into the what is, and in our optimism pretend that the what should be is already here. The point is, the evidence shows that self-perception is not characterized by realism. Normal human perception is marked not by accuracy, but by positive self-enhancing illusions about the self, the world, and the future. We begin life in illusion as children, and although the illusions somewhat fade as we age, we hang on to the illusions for security and comfort, and as a way to avoid acknowledging our own weakness, dependency, and uncertainty, which threaten our sense of self. Children and adults clearly assess themselves and their future prospects in an ego-enhancing manner. These illusions are not the exception, they are the rule. Humans everywhere engage in subtle and overt acts of self-deception. If you've seen previous episodes, you might already be drawing parallels between this and previous concepts I discussed, such as the bubble and the pattern I call the human condition. Let's unpack these parallels. When we line up the psychological perspective with the human condition pattern, we see they line up very nicely. The same 3-part human condition pattern we have explored in our other videos is visibly manifest in the psychological literature. Let's line up what we have gone over with the human condition pattern and see the parallels. First, we see a type of paradise, a state of innocence at the beginning of life. These are the positive illusions that we begin with in childhood, that we are adequate, capable, can control our environment, and have an optimistic future. Second, we see a fall or an awakening to reality and the wrestle that ensues. This is when the illusions are tested. As we move out from home and face the world, we will be wronged, experience disappointment, tragedy, betrayal, limitation, addiction, failure, personal inadequacy, competition, and the random terror of sickness and death. These experiences give us a taste for what reality really is. The illusions may shrink, but we desperately cling to them for security and comfort. Third, we see a struggle for redemption, usually manifest as the bubble. This is when we fight to keep the illusions, to keep ourselves in the walled garden. We create a false heaven where we are instead of reaching for the real one. We begin in illusions as children, let's call it a paradisiacal innocence, and as we become more conscious, we face a fork in the road. We can turn right and truthfully engage with the reality that we sense behind the illusions, or turn left and engage in self-deception and keep the illusions going, staying in the bubble. Truthfully engaging with reality and all of its contradiction, uncertainty, and tragedy can easily make us bitter, discouraged, and disillusioned. Literally disillusioned. The illusions that held us up collapse, and we can face existential despair. Taylor shows us that the evidence overwhelmingly demonstrates that normal human behavior is to turn left, to stay in illusionment and stay in the bubble. Ignorance is bliss, after all, and likewise the opposite is true. As King Solomon said, the more knowledge, the more grief. And similarly, Blaise Pascal, 17th century French philosopher, said, the more enlightened we are, the more wretchedness we discover in man. So is it better to remain in the illusions? After all, they give us a sense of security and comfort, optimism and contentment, self-worth, and a sense of personal adequacy. They serve as a place to hide from the monsters that lurk within ourselves, and they serve as a shield from the fire-breathing dragons that storm the skies and seas. So why leave the illusions behind? This is a question we will explore in upcoming videos, but perhaps as a simple answer, it's because monsters need to be faced and dragons need to be slain, not run from.